What's the matter, Skippy? What's got you all excited?
Welcome to the Scottish Rugby Blog podcast. I am Cammy Black and I'm joined this week by Rory Baldwin.
Hello.
And Al Kerr.
Hello.
Right, gents, I've got a fair bit to cover tonight, but first things first. I don't know what you guys thought, but I thought it was a bit cruel to drag Andy Robinson out on the 5th anniversary of him resigning to summarise on that game.
Yeah, we're a bit harsh, maybe.
Yeah.
I was encouraged to see that his eyes looked like they were distinctly better from the last time we saw him, which I think has cropped up in this pod before.
He looks increasingly like a man who's attempting a world record for the longest gurn. I keep expecting Norris McWhirter to turn up with a stopwatch and sort of say, "Oh, you've still got 5 days to go, Andy. Keep going."
His face is a little in danger of sort of folding in on itself.
Yeah. It must have been like being invited to your ex-wife's wedding, being there on Saturday for him.
Yeah, it would have been. You think he might take some pride in it. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe he thought, I laid the turf, or I put the perspex in that stopped Michael Cheika from erupting. I don't know what he did.
Well, probably more likely I introduced the younger man to my wife.
Yeah.
Right, but I've got a question for you then. Last time Scotland scored more than 50 points in a match, either of you know?
Well, there's been a lot of chat about statistics this week, and pretty much every post-match reaction piece has had some bit at the start about how horrific statistics are for Scotland fans to look over, which is probably why I don't do it. So I have absolutely no idea. But I would think probably, it wouldn't be a tier 1 nation because apparently, or a Southern Hemisphere nation because apparently we've never done that. So it would have to be someone like Portugal or Romania or.
Yeah, I'm going to say Portugal at the 2007 World Cup, maybe?
Yep, bang on. 56-10 against Portugal. Were you guys at that match?
No, we weren't actually, because it was a weird the weird packet. Like the ticket package was for all 4 group games plus the first quarter final, but because they'd done the horse trading and the 2 middle group games were in Scotland, we would have had to go out to France, come back to Scotland, then go back out to France again. So we our bank manager probably thanked us for we basically threw away the ticket for the first one.
Yeah,
because they were so cheap anyway in those days.
Well, it seems fitting that the last time around the blog was being conceived, and here we are 10 years later, and we've seen another 50 plus points, but this time against the tier 1 nation. Now, clearly, I'm not saying that's down to us. That's for history to decide. But Rory, apart from the fact that this is all down to us, what can we take away from that game?
Well, first, I think we shouldn't pretend that it was perfect. It was. We did pump them, we hammered them, we beat them fair and square. But I mean, if you watch I haven't actually watched the whole game back. I've watched the first half earlier. And this was a pretty evenly matched game up until the red card. So for me, the best thing to take from it was actually the manner that Scotland kicked on in the second half. Previously we would have seen Scotland teams maybe not be able to cope with suddenly being favourites or suddenly being in control of a game, and they might still have won it, but they wouldn't have won it looking confident. Whereas what the guys did was they basically put the foot on the Aussie throat and they didn't take it off until the end. And that, for me, was the most exciting thing, was to see a team confident in its own abilities.
Yeah, I think after the Australia try, after the start of the second half, I just scribbled in my notebook, restarts, and then switch off and complacent, once ahead, need to go for the kill and be more ruthless, thinking that would then be the story of the second half, but it wasn't. I think I was sort of worried about sort of thinking about the Argentina game back in 2014 where I think it was something ridiculous like 40 points to 15 or something with 10 minutes to go, and then managed to conspire to let Argentina almost back into the game. But Al, it's nice to start on a negative, I think, because people would worry if we didn't. But what was your big takeaway from the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rory makes a good point. The ruthlessness was probably the most refreshing thing, because we've seen it, and we would have, 20 minutes to go, shut up shop almost, and we've got 30 odd points, and we'll leave it where we are. It was refreshing to see us just decide that we were actually going to dish out a spanking. We've said probably on this podcast before, and we've certainly said in the blog, we were due to give somebody a spanking. It was quite refreshing that it was Australia. After those 1 point defeats we've had on a number of occasions, so it was a shame for Stephen Moore. But no, I thought it was thoroughly good. I think one of the real positives is, and this is weird, but it probably fits in with this podcast, is there were plenty of takeaways in terms of development, though. The defence still needs work, and there was enough for them to work on it. I would have been worried if they'd come out of there with an almost perfect performance. I think that would have set us up worse for the Six Nations. I think having to do some work going forward will probably keep them on their toes. So I'm going to take the fact that we still have development as a positive, because it'll keep us on our toes.
Rory, I mean, you're positive then. Because I'm not letting you just get away with that negative, turning it into positive. What was the one positive thing for you, if I'm going to force your hand? And you can't be negative and then turn it into
I can't
positive.
be negative. I wasn't negative the last time, was I? Positive. My one big positive was the line out. I mean, there's loads. There's John Barclay, his captaincy, his leadership decisions. Actually, the standard of decision making on the field was pretty good, but I think probably the difference, or the kind of main thing that we've seen as a change from Vern Cotter's Scotland, there's a lot of things that are quite similar, the improvement in attitude and things, but actually the speed with which they restart from the line out is one of the main new things, and you can only do that if your line out's functioning. And I think with Toulis helping to run the set piece, and with McInally at hooker, it's gone quite a big jump forward in terms of the quality. I mean, I think there was one messed up line out McInally had in across the whole 3 games, they said, which is pretty good compared to what we're used to. Yeah,
97%, which is it was the best line out completion I think in the autumn tests. 97%, which is pretty amazing when you think about the speed that they were throwing that in at.
Yeah, I mean they're using it as a restarting tool, but they're also competing on the opposition line out as well, and I think a lot of that comes down to the combinations. But McInally's got to take a fair bit of the credit for that, which puts him, I think, alongside his performances in the loose, probably in the hot seat for the Six Nations.
And Al, I mean, Stuart Hogg took to Twitter on Saturday night, and I think to wage a one-man battle against anyone who was tweeting Hogg who, he seemed to, I don't know if he was sat in a dark corner of a club in Edinburgh just name searching. I think I had a bit of a go at David Soul as well. But in some ways, it's a legitimate point in that I think maybe Saturday and even the summer, I suppose, showed that Scotland have now got depth, not just at fullback, but maybe across the board, and that's something to be pleased about.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we've decried the lack of depth, for a number of years, and you could go back a few years and say, well, we've always had you get all your fittest players in the park, but we've got a decent first 15, but it starts to fall to bits after. But, crikey, I think we probably had the conversation prior to this, the autumn internationals, and thinking, Darryl Marfell? Has he even been in an Edinburgh shirt? Jimmy Batty, a bit young. There was a few that we thought a wee bit of concern over, and it's amazing how these guys, pretty much to a man, other than maybe your guy from Newcastle, I can't even remember his name, but came on against Samoa and kind of disappeared. Yeah, that's the one, thank you. Pretty much all these guys have come in and stood up and really started to flesh out, a squad rather than just, a good 15. And you think about the guys that are missing. I mean, to me, that's hugely encouraging, and it really gives a really solid footing going into, the Six Nations, and even looking further ahead to the World Cup, because by the time we get to 2019, these guys that are only just starting to come through now, will have another 10, 15 caps hopefully underneath them, and that can only stand them in good stead. It's refreshing to think that gone are the days of just absolute squad fillers having to come in and you just know they're not up to the mark. I think it will keep everybody on their toes. I mean, Rory mentioned obviously McAnally, but you've got Fraser Brown there, and you've still got Ross Ford floating around, who's got 100 odd caps. It's a position where Ross Ford's not really had much competition, and suddenly he's probably the third cab off the rank now. It's a refreshing change of affairs. We just need to find a couple of extra world class 10s, and we're cooking.
I mean, Rory, do you think that the new guys coming into the squad and being filled with the confidence? I mean, it comes back to what Alan was saying last week, I think, about mental resilience. I mean, that obviously helps because even in the game, Finn Russell, I thought, had a bit of an off day, missed that early kick, and he threw quite a few hospital passes. And Tommy Seymour, again, wasn't his best performance. But I think in the past you would have seen Scotland fall apart under that sort of pressure, and the new guys sort of be put under the cosh. I mean, I'm thinking of the Ben Tullis and Hamish Watson's debuts against Italy. I mean, do you think that was there again? That mental resilience was there?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's difficult to know what the change that Tooney's made, but it just seems that these guys can slot in a lot more easily. So it's almost like the team is kind of like a machine, and you can take one part out and you can put in another part, and it doesn't have to be. We're not going to suddenly pretend that Daryl Marfo and Simon Bergen are a world-class propping pair, but they're able to slot in and do enough and execute the game plan well enough that it works. And when the game plan works, a lot of teams find it very hard to live with. So we could survive without losing Hogg, who's probably the one world-class player. Although I know a few of the guys on the commenters on the blog, feel we've got a couple more who are knocking on the door. But I think Hogg is probably the only one who would get in the top, definitely get into the squads of, say, the top three countries. And it's interesting to see these other guys who you might see, they might be described as journeymen, but I mean, they're definitely not they weren't the first choice at the start of, say, the summer or the start of the autumn. And they're able to fit in and do a good enough job that the kind of the organised chaos or the fastest rugby in the world TM still works, and I think it's that's going to pay off for Glasgow and Edinburgh as well, because if everybody knows that they can get picked if they're playing well rather than, say, on reputation, then they're going to all want to keep playing well, because they're going to want to be part of a Scotland team that's winning. They're going to know that they can be part of a Scotland team that's winning because they'll get picked if they're playing well. And it means that Edinburgh and Glasgow's levels are going to stay consistently high. And it's also going to, if you think about the centres, say Mark Bennett comes back fit, he might not walk into the team because there's a lot of centres there. But to have a guy like him available to Edinburgh, say, when the Six Nations is on and the other guys are away, if there's all those guys who've got international experience and caps and everyone's kind of levelling up, if you like, then that's going to help everybody all round.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier for these guys to drop into a successful team. If you think of over the last 15, 16 years, guys are coming into struggling sides. These guys are all coming into a side that's going forward, that's brimming with confidence. It's also got, I would suggest, probably a bigger pool of leaders. And I think that's something that both Cotter and Townsend have made a play on in terms of building out that leadership group. So it used to be, a Jason White or a Greg Laidlaw, and there was one person on the park, and there was a lack of leaders, I think, that can drag people and new introductions to the national side forward. And I think you see, Johnny Gray and Hogg and, Russell as well. There are a number of them that are now taking that leadership mantle, above and beyond just that person with the armband. So, I think it's a much more positive environment for these guys to come in, and I guess they're actually allowed to flourish rather than be, well, you're on your own, son, and don't cock it up.
I should get this out of the way now. In that Ryan Wilson had an okay game. It's a funny. Yeah, I don't think he's he's still to string, I think, a few performances together in a Scotland shirt, because I think you said, Rory, you didn't see him about the park that much, and maybe because I was getting pelters on Twitter beforehand, I was looking out for him a bit more.
I've kind of come to realise with Wilson that if I don't see him doing anything, that usually means he's done heaps. Because maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the stuff that I'm not looking at is the stuff that he's doing. And I mean, watching the first half back, I mean, Hugh Jones is another one who I thought maybe had a quiet game, but you actually watch the first half back and they're putting in a lot of tackles. Wilson certainly was, he was as usual all over the park, knocking people down. There's been some interesting debate in the comments and stuff this week on the blog about whether we do actually need a big ball carrying eight. If you get I mean, we saw the ball carrying from Batty and Fagerson when they came on.
Yeah.
If you get your front five as your ball carriers, then use your back row to dominate the breakdown and to tackle. And
and Hamish,
then you don't need a big ball carrier, which I suppose is an approach. But
yeah, I mean, I've come to realise that I was thinking about it today, and maybe Ryan Wilson isn't the number 8 Scotland need, but it's the one it deserves right now.
Yeah, yeah, I think you might be right there.
Yeah, but I sort of take the point. I think I've come to realise that I think the guys in the comment section are probably right, and you got the likes of Hamish Watson carrying at 7. Then maybe it's just that Scotland don't need that traditional ball carrying 8. Although I will say that if you look at the stats, Ryan Wilson there is a marked difference in how he played against Samoa when we were quite critical of him compared to how he played against Australia, and I think it's more of those games that he needs to have before I'm going to be convinced that should be starting every game for Scotland.
I mean, I think it says something though about the rest of 8's pivotal, right? So you would think knocking 50 points past a tier 1 nation, your 8 has probably had a stormer. And whilst Rory's probably right, and I have watched the game back and I still found Wilson to be fairly anonymous, but that's possibly because he was lying over the ball for a fair amount of the game. You would expect 8 to be fairly prominent, in a 50-point shellacking of a tier 1 nation, just in terms of giving you that go forward. The fact that that's coming from other positions, I just think though, imagine that Scotland pack with an 8 that can actually drive forward. I really like the look of Hamilton, and I think he could easily fit into that 8 role. And I'd love to see what he could do, because I think you've got enough dog in Barkley and Watson, that you could afford to then have a traditional 8 in there. I'd really like to see that go forward, because I think in this Scotland team, it would maybe elevate it yet again to another level.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, if we look ahead to the Six Nations, then when we're talking about elevating it to another level, with all the replacements and forced and otherwise, I mean, you look at Barkley, I would say is probably nailed on as captain, just in terms of his performance and the way that the decisions on the pitch and the way he communicates with the referees. And then you've got Ali Price at 9, who just fits that Townsend mould perfectly. Is Laidlaw's place now on the bench? Yeah,
well, it's definitely not starting. It's on the bench or worse, I would say. There's no way that we can play the game we need to play with the speed. I mean, yeah, you can say, Greg, okay, we're going to play it quickly. You have to get everything away quickly, and he does do it sometimes, but he doesn't do it all the time. And Price does it almost all the time. I think Price is the man now, and plus, the thing he's got with the partnership with Russell is pretty critical as well, because that needs to not be mistimed or go wrong, because it's a knife edge that Finn runs along.
I think having Laidlaw on the bench though would actually be ideal, because you think of his game management, and there are a number of games. France last year in the Six Nations springs out to me because he came off the park, and their game management after being nudged in front towards the end. That's the sort of player you want on, that does marshal the troops pretty well. It's another leader coming onto the park as well. At that late stage. So and Price can play 80 minutes. He's young enough and fit enough that he can get around for the 80 minutes if needs be. So, I think, Laidlaw gives you a really good balance coming off the bench. I don't think you throw him out quite yet because he is, he's still a very, very good player playing at, incredibly high level.
No, he's definitely, he'll definitely be in the squad.
Yeah, bench would be where you would have Laidlaw. I think it gives a good balance.
And is there anyone else you guys think that might now struggle to get back into the starting 15 or even the 23 that might have previously been nailed on?
I think Rory and I, after the New Zealand game, had said we've probably seen the last of Al Dickinson. I can't see him getting back in when he's fit. Trying to think who else.
Yeah, I mean you've got Sutherland who's on the fitness trail. He should have banked some form by then. You've got British and Irish Lion Alan Dell who may or may not be back. And of course, there's everyone's favourite Daryl Marfo. So I mean, even in Edinburgh, Dickinson could struggle to get a game.
Yeah.
There's no doubting that he's class, but it's the injuries and whether he gets enough of game time. I mean, again, it could be a great thing for Edinburgh to have him around and not being used by Scotland. But then Edinburgh have got so many loose ends that Scotland caps. They'll probably be okay in that department.
I think Richie Gray's going to have to go some to get back in as well. He's got Gilchrist, Toulis, his younger brother. He's going to be there or thereabouts. But up until about 18 months ago, he would have just waltzed straight back in there. But
it'll probably upset Brodie. But I thought Gilchrist had a really good game on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean he was pretty good. I mean the line-out seemed to go a bit more smoothly when Toulis came on, but that could just be a familiarity thing because Toulis has played more of the games, but Gilchrist had a good game. It's probably, I would say, for me the starting pair is still Johnny and Toulis, so it's kind of a scrap between Gilchrist and Richie for the kind of the bench second row spot, and I guess Scott Cummings may or may not come into the equation before then.
And is Swinson gone completely then?
Yeah, so I mean Swinson could be one that falls under that list, Cam, of people who might struggle. If Gilchrist can maintain his form, certainly. Yeah,
and then you've got Rob Harley as well, who might struggle. Although Swinson and Harley, I suppose that in their plus columns is the versatility to play second row and back row, which might see that they might still be there or thereabouts around the bench. I mean,
maybe gets them in a training squad.
Yeah, I mean, I was maybe wondering actually even about Sean Maitland, who had a very good game. And I think, like you were saying, Rory, he's slow to start, but once he gets going, he's quite fast. But if you've got Duncan Taylor when he's fit, Hugh Jones can cover fullback and wing as well, I think, and then Hogg. Maitland, when he runs directly and he gets up ahead of steam, he runs quite fast, but he struggles to break through the line in the same way that the other guys do. So I wondered whether or not he might now struggle to make a 23 if everyone's fit.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I think probably Duncan Taylor would be best, although for me, my ideal partnership would be Taylor and Jones in the centre. But at the same time, Taylor's is probably better off the bench than Dunbar would be, say. So you'd probably start Dunbar and Jones, and then have Taylor as your sort of number 23, because he can cover a lot of positions. And then again, Horn. I mean, you're basically trying to stack the bench with all these guys that haven't quite played, or in order to give you a bit more oomph around 50-minute mark. Maitland, yeah, I mean, to be honest, Tommy Seymour's got to. He needs to find some form, because he's had two pretty poor games when pretty much everyone else on the park has performed well above expectation. So I don't know what Rob Howley's done to him, but
the curse of Howley.
Yes, I mean at the moment Hogg is obviously nailed on. As long as he doesn't pick a fight with anyone on Twitter that's bigger than him.
David Soul.
David Soul. Byron McGuigan, I think. He's.
Let's get Namibia's Byron McGuigan.
Yeah, he looked quite impressive, and certainly he's got the physicality of someone like Visser. I mean, I did see him slip off a couple of tackles, also like Visser. So yeah, I don't know the wing. I say the wing slots are two that are definitely up for grabs, but there's a few solid candidates, probably between Seymour, Maitland, McGuigan, Lee Jones. and there's always the possibility that he plays maybe Hugh Jones or Duncan Taylor out of position if he wants to get all his talent on the park in one go.
And then not even. I mean,
No,
sorry, Cam.
No, you go.
I was just going to say another name, maybe not for the wing, but you're talking about the centre options. We've not even mentioned Matt Scott, who
or Mark Bennett.
Or Mark Bennett. I mean, these are guys that we were pinning our hopes on. In the very near past. So it's ridiculous depth, really, when you think about it. And
then you've got the likes of Kinghorn at Edinburgh, who, if he kicks on, are suddenly starting to come into the reckoning. So it's not a bad place to be compared to where we've been in the past, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit of extra depth. I mean, I think we've always had players in the pack, but actually having some genuine selection choices in the backs is probably something that we're not quite used to, and you could probably make arguments for just about any of them. But the good thing seems to be is that they're all willing to buy into Townsend's system and play the way, and it almost doesn't matter who you pick as long as they all play with the right attitude.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with all of this though is that all goes back to Russell, because the way the game we're trying to play, he gets banjoed, and we are struggled to get somebody who's going to go in. You almost make the case to say drop Hogg in at 10. Because he will play off the cuff. Because I don't really know who else you're looking then at either promoting somebody young or Pete Horn, and you can put Horn in there. So I think we really do struggle at 10. I'm sure they're scouring, passports and birth certificates in New Zealand and South Africa as we speak to find somebody with a Scottish.
They've gone. Well, I was going to say they've gone further afield than that. Closer to home but further afield, and the Edinburgh have signed an 18-year-old from Castleford Tigers Rugby League today. To be fair, on the YouTube highlights clip, he looks quite thin. He likes to show and go. He's quite strong in defence, so it'll be interesting to see how he gets on. Apparently, Alan Tate rates him. He's not going to go straight into the Edinburgh squad and then straight into the Scotland squad if Finn's injured. No. And there was
he's still under 18, or he's still 18. I think he's 18. Under 19.
Yeah, and then there's the article that was on I missed who wrote it. The article on the blog today, Rory, about Duncan, the disappearance of Duncan Weir.
Yeah, that was me. I mean, I spent quite a portion of my lunch hour trying to Google Simon Hickey's parentage, and there's disappointingly little information about sort of births, marriages and deaths in Auckland in 1992, and there's also quite annoyingly a judge somewhere near Bishop Auckland whose name is Simon Hickey in England, and he's just ruining my Google results. So I wasn't able to find out if the guy if Simon Hickey is Scottish qualified. The suspicion seems to be not, because the SRU probably would have mentioned it in the sort of press releases when he was signed, but he looks a really good signing for Edinburgh.
Yeah, and I guess how old is he?
He's 23.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose if the new rules aren't in, does he get caught under the current Regulation 8 rules?
I forget. Does it not have to be when you sort of?
No, I think it's when you start. So anyone that's in the system now, I think, is on 3 years. I think from next year, once you start, it's from 5 years after that.
Because he's not going to arrive till next season. So.
Yeah. So he's probably a genuine signing rather than looking at him as a project player. Although 23 is not too old.
I mean, it's theoretically possible.
Yeah,
but if we have to, you can't think that the SRU are sitting there going, right, well, Finn Russell will be okay for 5 years, and we'll just wait until So maybe, I don't know, maybe he does have a Scottish granny and they'll tell us about it next year. It'll spring it on us in the summer.
Well, here's hoping. I mean, looking back on it, probably worth choosing a moment each from the autumn test that stand out. I mean, for me, it was probably just after the Kepu sending off, where the crowd really got behind the team, and that just before that try just before half time. Because I was a bit worried, I think, after the emotion of the New Zealand game that everyone talking about what an improved atmosphere at Murrayfield, that it might fall flat against Australia. But it didn't, and that was really heartening to see the crowd get up for the game again. And I suppose the New Zealand game last weekend probably helped. But Rory, I mean, what was your sort of one moment that sort of stood out for you over the last 3 games?
I think it would have to be Big Doddy at the kickoff, which doesn't really count as during the game, but certainly that atmosphere there just before kickoff there in the All Blacks game was sort of as kind of emotional and charged, but kind of in a good way. There's been kind of sometimes some kind of hostile atmospheres at Calcutta Cups and things, but that was probably the best Murrayfield atmosphere I've experienced.
And for you, what was your sort of one moment that stood out over the last 3 games?
You've already partially stolen my thunder. It's probably only about 10 minutes after that, but there was, I think, about 10 minutes, maybe not even 10 minutes into the New Zealand game, Hogg had a kick of which he spiralled 80 metres down and it rolled out about 5 metres from the New Zealand line. And I very clearly remember turning around to Rory and just saying, can you feel that? There is definitely, something is in the air. You just knew at that point that this was a contest. It was just one of those moments you could just feel we'd had an absolute blinding start. We'd put them back. He wasn't even that he had a great angle for the kick. It was just perfect, and you thought, they're on it. They really are on it, and this could be our day. There's been too few of those moments, I think, over the last 10.
It was a good time to do head, heart and arse for the Six Nations. There's a lot of people, including Jeremy Guscott today, I think, tipping Scotland as Six Nations contenders, although we seem to be here after most autumns. But Al, you want to go head, heart and arse, Scotland and the Six Nations?
So, arse would be losing to Wales in the first game. Then I think we've got back-to-back home games after that.
Yeah.
So, we get the result against France, run England close but fall short, beat Italy, and then obviously get dropped. So, the 2 victories. I think head would be that we beat Wales. I think we'll beat France. England at home is a toss-up, but I think we said we're pretty confident going down to that place that shall not be named. And last year, and we all saw how that worked. I think head, though, realistically, we've got to be looking at probably 3-4 victories. I think Ireland or England, we could take one of those. Will it be enough to win? I'm not entirely sure. Optimistic, it's got to be Grand Slam, right? I mean, there's not a single game there you say we can't win. I think if it was going to fall down, it would be Ireland away rather than England at home. I think we're due England. I'm quite looking forward to pumping them by 53 to 20 something as well, since we seem to be making a habit of it.
Rory, your head, heart and arse for the Six Nations?
Obviously, heart is obviously the Grand Slam or the tournament win. Head, England and Ireland are definitely, they're the top 2, but they're almost, everyone's going to be talking about them. And the worry for me is how the guys can play against the different style that you get in the Six Nations, where everything's a little bit tighter, a bit more, it's tournament rugby as opposed to kind of friendly rugby, if you like. And I think, Scotland traditionally do well when they've got England and France at home, and we do have England and France at home. We've got a new coach. We've got a team that's on fire. It's probably going to depend on injuries all round. If we've got our full squad, and England, they don't really get affected by injuries, do they? Because they've just got so many players. But Ireland. I think Scotland, without a doubt, have the best attack in any of the Six Nations at the moment. Tooney has to come up with a way to make sure that they're allowed to use it, because that's been the easy way to shut both Glasgow and Francoeur Scotland down in the past, was just by figuring out a way to nullify it, and then it doesn't really matter the fancy backs.
But Rory, just on that, I think you've seen how Townsend will try and go about that because they played the number one side in the world and decided the best form of defence is to attack.
Yeah.
And I think it's exactly what they'll try and do. They'll try and negate England, for example.
Yeah, stop them from stopping them, if you like.
Exactly. And it's what they did against the All Blacks. And it did it pretty effectively against the All Blacks. So I think that's where the tactic that they'll employ. It may lead to a 60-point to 20 odd dropping again. You would certainly hope not.
There's a bit in the Watchmen comics where Adrian Veidt lets the comedian beat him up just so he can then learn how to win in a fight against him. And you sort of hope to that end that Townsend's learnt from going down and playing Saracens, and even the England game last year, that if you learn nothing from them, you learn then how not to get beaten that way and how to then start to form a plan to win a game. And I think you're right, probably the attack is the best form of defence, and going and scoring lots of tries is a good starting point because that's not something we've ever done before.
Yeah, I mean, we did score a lot of tries. We scored two, 3 tries against England anyway in that defeat, which was heavy, but we did put a few points on the board ourselves. You can almost guarantee they will be wary in that. And the defence will be wary in that game because they won't want to look as foolish as they did at Twickenham. I think the other thing that we need to try and think about is the crowd. I mean, the Twickenham crowd will be huge for England, but that Murrayfield crowd that's building can be huge for Scotland as well. So I think my head prediction to finish off would probably be I think we can win 4 of the games, but whether that's enough, I think Ireland away, we should be a close game, but that's going to need a bit of luck. But I don't see any reason why we can't win our 2 home games and Wales and Italy. But yeah, as Al said, the start against Wales is crucial. It is every Six Nations. You lose your first game and technically you're still in the tournament, but in reality, it's a little bit like Europe in the Champions Cup. If you don't get off to a good start, you can be out of the running, no matter how well you're playing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got down that if you're realistically looking for Scotland to show that they've progressed, you're looking at beating Wales, France, and Italy, and then at least keeping to within a score of England and Ireland. Yeah. I think if they don't manage that, then I think we're probably back to where we were before the autumn, which is, we'll do well in the autumns, and then things don't go so well at the Six Nations, and we're still a very inconsistent team. But if we're going to be consistently good, you need at least 3 wins plus the other 2 not to be heavy defeats.
Yeah,
which is
I would say
that's as optimistic as I can get.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair head.
And obviously, ours would be that we get beaten by everyone, or even that we win a couple and then we get beaten on the last weekend by Italy away.
Yeah,
that would be the arse.
Suitably arse.
Right, we will move on to this
comment of the week.
Yeah, it's time for comment of the week. It's our turn to look at what you guys have been saying in the comments section of the blog. Rory, you've picked one out, haven't you?
Yeah, I've got one from Gav. Put a post up about 5 things that went wrong during the All Blacks game, which is obviously not the best place to put a comment about the Australia game. But this is a comment that's not actually made it to the light of day because it breaches our rules quite considerably. But we've got a bleeping machine here, so this is from JP, who posted on Gav's post about the All Blacks game, and I think it was probably during the Australia game or just after the Australia game, and he said, just reflecting on the second half, your swearing rules, yes, get in, analysis, just get in. That was not because of a red card. Some of those boys are third choice. Some of those boys are effectively debutants. Those boys just stuffed Australia a week after giving everything against the All Blacks. We gave those boys one hell of a beating today. John Barclay, 4 out of 5 against the Aussies. What a captain to have.
Yep, well, what was his name?
JP.
Thanks, JP. You've just caused me about 10 minutes worth of work after this podcast has finished editing that out. I'm not sure how much of that we're going to be able to play out, but yeah, it'll be good. Lots of beeping. Al, did you manage to pick anything out?
I did. I am grateful to Rory to point me in the direction of this one, but it's a good comment, and it's from Angerine. This is on the player rating post from the Aussie game. So going into stato mode for a second, these players just scored more tries in one match against Australia. Australia! ! Than Scotland managed in any full Six Nations tournament between 2002 and 2015, except for 2005 when we managed exactly 8. The change has been extraordinary. Literally every time we have the ball in the opposition half, they look under extreme pressure. Totally agree on Ali Price's man of the match. Johnny Gray is adding aggression to his game and still giving us the quick ball in the ruck. Watson is impossibly strong, and everyone seems to be playing beyond themselves for Townsend. And I think, obviously that stat is just, it's a bit eye-opening. When you realise quite how far this team has come, in sort of 2 years to 18 months. It's quite astounding, really, in terms of attacking intent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the point about Johnny Gray is quite an interesting one, because we haven't really talked that much about him in the last 2 podcasts, but there was that clip, I think, that got shared over the weekend of the press conference where I think somebody asked Townsend if Johnny Gray needed to add more to his game, which got, I think Barkley was trying not to laugh. But I actually think that there are signs there that he's gone away and he's worked on a lot of the things that we've maybe in the past been critical of him for. He's standing up in the tackle, he's breaking through the line, he's not just going to ground as quickly as he can. And, that line he ran for the try, and then even against New Zealand where he went with his back to allow him to turn. And I think in the past with Johnny Gray, you would have seen him sort of flop to the floor and try and recycle the ball. So I've been quite impressed with Johnny Gray. I think he's added a lot while he's been off. So I've been quite impressed with him.
He had a poor Samoa game as well. So to come back the way he has, because I didn't think he had a particularly good game against Samoa. But I agree. I think the last 2 games he's been outstanding again.
Yeah. I went for iMac on the player ratings, who said, "What an amazing performance, but the scrum is still so creaky and no obvious solutions to make it less so. So we must play accordingly and not choose to scrum when we have a penalty in front of the posts. We lost scrums against 14-man New Zealand and Australia. Just give it to Ali and tap and go." And there's a few things I'd pick iMac up on. I mean, I don't think we did. I think we once went for a scrum against New Zealand, and it's not, although it's 14-man, they don't necessarily have a disadvantage in the scrum because they're generally still playing with 8. And I generally think, if you look across the whole of the series, the scrum has been okay. I don't think you could say any more than that, but that's better than I think except when Nell and Dickinson were there, that's better than we've been able to say about the Scottish scrum in recent years. Is, it's okay, it's quite good for Scotland. They've not gone backwards that much. They've been penalised, but not every scrum. So I think there's signs that it's going in the right direction, but there's still a lot to do in terms of showing the referees a picture. I don't know if you guys agree with that.
Yeah, I think certainly the line out has been a massive improvement since probably a couple of years ago. I think the scrum is definitely still the area of slight concern. But again, we're looking at 3rd, 4th choice scrummagers. Maybe not, the guys that played in the autumn have done great jobs in the loose, and some of them have done their credentials no harm. But there's still probably a question mark over a few of them. Fagerson's scrumming seems to be improving, and he's actually had a pretty solid autumn despite not starting every game. I think his impact off the bench, he and Batty against Australia was great, and when you're actually looking for literal impact, that's the sort of thing that we saw from them. So if Nell can get fit in time for the Six Nations, then he'd probably still be the starter for his kind of scrummaging, and then you bring Fagerson off the bench to kind of rampage when there's maybe not quite so many scrums going on. But
when you think about the age, though, of the that group of props in particular, and if you take it in World Cup cycles, you're 2 years out from the next World Cup. Those guys, Fagerson, you have Dell if he comes back, Batty, Marfo. Marfo's a wee bit older, but he's still only mid-20s. Nell should still be there or thereabouts. Most of those guys are still learning their trade, and so much of that position or those positions is technical and knowing how to get the upper hand. And to have a group all growing up at that point, I think you could see that turn into from a point of weakness into a point of strength over time. Because it's quite it's a unit that's going to stick together. You think over a number of seasons.
Yeah, I mean Marfo's 27, but Xander Fagerson is still 21.
Yeah.
So I mean he's got 10 years ahead of him.
It's ridiculously young for an international prop, 21.
Yeah.
Most of the guys, you're looking at late 20s before most international props sort of start coming good. But it's probably indicative. The fact they're all young is probably indicative of the fact that Scotland haven't had anybody decent in the scrum for quite a number of years now.
Or fit.
I
think they've got half decent props, but it's just they're made of glass.
Not since Gavin Kerr and Craig Smith anyway.
Yeah.
Or Chunk in the Speedos.
Yeah,
Chunk.
Well, on that note, let's do this.
Well, we're looked high and we're looked low. We seen Dougie Bop on in the Speedos, but I just wanna know, did you see the legend that's Dougie Donnelly?
Yeah, it's Where's Dougie Donnelly? I can't say Where's Dougie Donnelly. I keep wanting to say Dougie Donnelly.
Let's just call it Where's Dougie Donnelly.
Where's Dougie Donnelly? Which from now on I'm just going to call our news section because it's a lot easier to describe that way. But please get in touch with us with your news, rumours, anyone you've seen out and about. We'll start with a huge congratulations to the happy couple. Finn and Ali Price off to Monaco together in a private jet. Don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah, I don't have Instagram, so I miss all the excitement.
I only got Instagram just because I realised that's where all the gossip was. It was quite interesting. There was Stuart Hogg had put a video of the three of them getting on a private jet, and I understand from spies I have that Ryan Wilson was also on the plane. So I assume that Hogg and Russell were the ones that were invited to the World Rugby ceremony, and they've taken Ali Price and Ryan Wilson as their plus ones.
In the gown.
But Greg Laidlaw's there as well, presumably babysitting.
Yeah.
And I saw he was attending a meeting with Dylan Hartley on the laws of the game this morning.
Really? A seminar for professional rugby players who don't know the laws of the game.
Yeah, something like that. But we haven't had any. Do you see anybody interested in the game, Rory?
I did. Well, I did actually. It's almost. I was sort of sitting writing some notes, and I thought actually this might be like an actual Where's Dougie Donnelly because it's I think it's on brief. Hugh Dan MacLennan was sat a few seats in front of me in the press gallery.
Yeah.
At Murrayfield, and I would just like to report exclusively that he had a packet of mini cheddars and 3 blue riband bars, original, not Aldi knockoffs, for his halftime snack.
In half time alone?
Yeah, well,
wow.
He started at half time. I mean, it may have. He wasn't. I mean, I don't think he wasn't commentating. At least I didn't see him commentating because he was sat there with no microphone. So, So I think he just had a little picnic instead.
Very nice. I remembered the other day that somebody at my work sold a router to Stuart Hogg on eBay once. So that's
nice.
Yeah.
That's more like it. This is the sort of thing we're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. It's that sort of mundane little snippets of insights into the players' lives. That's the sort of thing we want.
Did Andy Robinson not try and run you over once, though?
Me?
Yeah.
No, Andy Robinson. No, not me. I've never. Not that I'm aware of.
You used to bump into people in Edinburgh, did you not?
I almost got ran off the road by Johnny Gray.
Oh, yeah.
I had Simon Taylor come round to view my flat when we sold that.
There you go.
But probably the best one, and Rory knows this one because I think he was certainly within the grounds of Murrayfield at the time, was the time I accidentally urinated all over Rob Wainwright's mate's wallet in the urinals at Murrayfield, which was an unfortunate incident. But once you start, you just can't stop.
The pockets on like pink jeans are not very secure.
They aren't.
So
No.
he dropped the wallet. You weren't.
Yeah, wasn't trying to
It wasn't
pickpocket or
vindictive.
peeing in his pocket. No. It wasn't that sort of day.
Right. Well, yeah. There's not much news going about. I mean, there's obviously the Callum MacLennan news that was announced today, and they've Edinburgh have also signed another South African 10, whose name I can't remember.
Something Vander something, I think.
Van der Susan.
He played for them at the weekend.
Yep. I think that's it.
Van der Valt, I think his name is.
Van der Velk. Is that not is he not a TV detective?
He could be.
I wish I had the theme tune to play now.
You can go and read all about it on the blog. There's a list of every standoff that Edinburgh signed this week, which is quite a big list.
Hang on a minute. I'm going to see if I can get the. Let's see if this works. Now, if this is working, then the Van der Valk's theme tune should be playing now. I have no idea whether that's working or not, so let's. I'll just put that to the end. That's the Van der Valk theme tune for anybody that doesn't know what it is. Right, we'll move on now after that that Van der Valk theme tune, and we'll do this. Yeah, it's time for Hands in the Ruck. It's our Any Other Business section of the podcast. We need you to submit your Hands in the Ruck as well. So if there's anything been annoying you, do get in touch through the blog, Twitter, Facebook, any other way that you want to. Al, we'll start with you. What's had its hands in your ruck this week?
I was horribly disappointed when I listened to the podcast last week, and Rory completely stole my thunder with his gripe against the Irish moaning, because I was gearing myself up for 2 weeks. for a full blown rant, and I've had the wins entirely taken out of my sails.
That's what you're annoyed about, is me being annoyed about it.
Yes, absolutely. Actually, Rory is my hands in the ruck. I think the only other thing I would say is Stephen Moore, and I just think I hope the other 14 Aussies and the 13 others that stayed on the park were thoroughly ashamed of himself. A man has put so much into Australia. It was a thoroughly rotten sending off. Actually annoyed me, because as good as Scotland played, Australia fell to bits in that last 15-20 minutes, and it was a bit of a shambles. And I actually think, just generally, Australian rugby, I think I had one of these rants with Italy, so also not quite the same position as Italy. I do think Australian rugby's on a pretty rapid downslide. I know they beat New Zealand earlier in the year, but even at a professional level, Western Force, I think, have gone now. I don't think there's any rugby on terrestrial telly in Aussie now. It's a pretty poor state of affairs, and I just thought, I did feel for Stephen Moore. I was a wee bit angry because I think he was let down by some of the others that were in yellow. I refuse to say gold when they're that insipid.
It was quite a nice reception he got from the Murrayfield crowd though when he went off. I thought that was quite a nice touch. If he,
I thought it was a wee bit of class, right? I mean, it was a knowledgeable audience.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll have all stuck an extra $5 in the envelope for his leaving present after that. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's quite interesting because when you speak to people in Australia, you realise. I think we maybe think that rugby union's a lot more popular out there than it is, but they've got leagues big, cricket's big, Aussie rules is big, so I'm not sure necessarily that the union has as much prestige as maybe we think it does in Australia.
I mean, I think the challenge that they're going to have is, I understand that league out there has just signed $1 billion TV rights deal, and is about to just be swimming with money. And it's almost the inverse of what we have in the Northern Hemisphere, where unions is the richer sport, and it has been a traditional gravitation, if not in huge numbers, but from league to union. And I think what you're actually seeing, certainly in Australia, is a gravitation of the best players from union to league, and I think that will only get more pronounced with that sort of investment going into the the league structure, and union, I think, is getting left behind. And it's a bit sort of blasé to say it, but you do need a strong Australia. You need to have these big beasts at the top of their game to have a really competitive international structure.
Yeah, which I guess is the point that Steve Hansen was making after the Scotland game, is everyone in New Zealand was getting bored with New Zealand winning all the time, and if you've got competitive teams, then it makes it better. But if you've got teams like Australia and South Africa just playing badly repeatedly, then yeah, it doesn't necessarily do anybody else any good. Rory, what's had its hands in your ruck this week?
Well, to be honest, nothing really has wound me up this week other than the traffic getting out of Edinburgh on a Saturday night. So I was going to talk about the celebrity death match, which I'm going to call a twaltercation between Hoggy and David Soul, but you've already covered that. So
sorry, we should probably
right.
We should probably better coordinated than this. But
yeah,
anybody would think we planned this.
Yeah, I did think looking at it, it was interesting. It maybe shows that Hogg is actually more humble than we give him credit for, because he actually thought that Soul was being serious, and obviously didn't realise how tongue-in-cheek that comment clearly was. As obviously, Hoggy is Scotland's best player, pretty much. It's a shame for him. He's got not to play. But if you can't go onto Twitter and have a rant, then what's the point?
Yeah, I'm not sure name searching is the healthy thing to do, though. I mean, I noticed a lot of the tweets got deleted. I think probably about the same time as he got on the private jet, but
maybe he had a few champagnes. Yeah. Although I was a bit interested. This is completely unrelated, but I was watching Colombo yesterday, and he was asking someone if they had anything to drink, and they said no, not a drop, only champagne. So maybe Hoggy was sober apart from champagne, and that's why he went on a Twitter rampage. I don't know.
Possibly. We've had a couple of ones on Twitter and the blog. Stuart on the blog said his hands in the ruck is punters in the row behind me at Murrayfield who decide to coach the boys as play goes on all through the effing game. From row Z at the top tier, they can't hear you, and then there's another rude word, but he bleeped it out.
Some asterisks.
He's asterisked, I think, which is how I managed to get through, which I thought was a good shout. I always get wound up by that. I think one of the things, there's a few people commenting on the blog last week saying that Scotland should have gone for the points over the post a lot more than they did against New Zealand, which I think when you actually look at the score was pretty counterintuitive, and you always get comments like that. I think from people in the crowd who maybe don't watch an awful lot of rugby or keep up with things, or I don't know what it is, but or feel compelled to contribute in some way, even though it serves a very little purpose.
It can be a tricky thing, because sometimes it's down to the momentum, and that can sometimes be quite hard to sort of to gauge until you're kind of used to the ebbs and flows of the game, because it might seem like a perfect moment to take 3 points, and to be honest, usually that is the sensible option, but sometimes there is that moment to keep your foot to the pedal.
I know my brother gets annoyed. I go to Murrayfield with my brother. He always gets annoyed when people start screaming when there's a defensive overlap, because as he points out, by the time they get the ball out there, the defence will have drifted across. So that's probably his hands in the ruck. Would be his hands in the ruck, is the fact that everybody screams whenever it looks like there's space out wide, because the defence just shifts along and it invariably catches it. Black and Red on Twitter said, "Can we please have an announcer that doesn't speak slowly?" That was his hands in the ruck, which leads into mine, which is the music choice at Murrayfield isn't getting any better. John Barkley scored a try and they played Shang-a-Lang, which was absolutely criminal. So yeah, I think that's it. Any more hands in the ruck from either of you guys?
Not really. I mean, I was just thinking there's probably I'd really like to know in the press conference afterwards. Michael Cheika had a real go at one of the journalists, but it was an Australian journalist. There were only about 3 or 4 of them that seem to have made the trip, which I suppose is kind of representative of the kind of media interest in Union over in Australia at the moment. But I can't remember. They said, what was it? Someone asked him if Kepu should miss games or something because of the red card or something like that, and he said, "Well, your paper will just campaign to make it happen anyway," and then kind of shut the guy down. But I don't know who it was. So if anyone knows which newspaper Michael Cheika is beefing with, you can fill us in on Twitter.
Yeah,
just the one, Rory. I think he's probably beefing. I think he's beefing with many.
He's beefing with everybody. I think that's his
Poor chap.
Yeah, bless him. I will not stick the boot in. I felt quite bad you feel quite bad. We've all been there. We've been on the back. We know. I think the Scotland fans were perfectly placed to understand Australia's pain.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's it for this week. We will be back at some point in December with a Christmas special. We'll pull something together and probably theme it along the lines of A Christmas Carol, because that seems to be the thing you do for Christmas specials. Don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We've had a review this week from Sick of Flats, which I assume is a reference to David Flatman rather than the type of shoe, which says, good podcast with interesting chat about Scottish rugby. Sound quality can be hit and miss. Quite funny at times. So that's the kind of review we want. Just, realistic. Don't big us up. Just, manage people's expectations. We're quite happy with that.
Exactly.
You can, don't forget, visit the blog, scottishrugbyblog.co.uk. Leave us your comments and we'll pick them up. You can find us on Twitter at ScottRugbyBlog, Facebook, facebook.com/ScottishRugbyBlog. Is that right, Rory?
Yeah, I've got it in front of me to make sure we get it right.
Yes! Brilliant, got it right. And you can get in touch with us all on, you can get in touch with me at Cammy Black, and Rory's invariably on the at Scott Rugby Blog one as well. But for now, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from Rory and Al.
Goodbye.
Thanks, chaps.
Thank you.
Cheers, Cam.
Thanks. Speak later. Bye.
Cheers.
Catch you later.
Bye.
Bye.